I'm in the Ray Gosling archives at the moment with Colin Haynes. It's an incredible space. It's absolutely rammed wall to ceiling with folders and files and books, and goodness knows how you make sense in here, but hopefully Colin may be able to shed a bit of light on it for us. So Colin, first of all, can you tell us how you first met Ray?
I was involved with a voluntary project in St Anne's in the 70s, and he was running Satra at that time, and well, we came to Nottingham mainly because Satra was happening and Ray was interested in having us there. And then I worked with him on a community paper called Chase Chat and various other things.
And you've got copies of Chase Chat in here.
Yes,
if
we've got a
people-
full set of Chase Chats.
And
That was a paper that ran for about 10 years every month. It was
Every
quite
month.
a prodigious rather feat to keep it going. Yeah,
And who wrote it?
local people. It was all written by local people and covering what was happening in the area.
We're sat around at the moment. There's lots of filing cabinets. Should we open one?
So the filing cabinets were sort of Ray's archive room. Ray had an archive room that was set shelving rather like this, but everything was filed theoretically geographically in his own system, but other things were put inside newspapers and filed amongst that. And when his house was being sold because he was being evicted, because he hadn't paid his VAT and he'd been bankrupt, he had to sell the house to pay back the VAT. All this stuff was likely to be thrown in the skip. And John Goodridge of Trent University came and collected it all, and he's put it all into filing cabinets. So it's all in the order that Ray had it around his room. We're about at the level at the moment. This is Liverpool. So I think probably because of the Beatles Association, Ray decided to put all his stuff about. It's put down as Liverpool pop music. So he's got copies of Fabulous, the Radio Luxembourg, was it? Don't know. Copies of Beat, magazine about Cliff Richards because he was very fond of Cliff Richards, and Rave magazine, yeah, and all sorts of magazines. There we are. A New Musical Express 1966 annual, copy of International Times, that's a bit later, copies of Melody Maker from the 60s. So Ray would sort of put them together and probably write something, as a result of that, he'd write something about music, or he might never get round to it. And then sort of Liverpool carries on, and you've got a whole section on Liverpool poets, because Adrian Henry came and stayed at his house from time to time. The pop stuff, Billy Fury Monthly's got mixed up with the Liverpool poets. I'm not quite sure how. It wasn't a logical system. It says Liverpool immigrants, and then this whole section's on football and footballers from Liverpool. So,
And with these magazines and newspapers, they're not they're not articles that Ray wrote. They're more resources he used for research for programmes.
Mostly, but mixed amongst them there are things that he wrote. That's why we have to be really careful when we're going through them, because he often would just slip in the draft in between the pages of something that he'd written in, and it would be just filed in with all the rest of it. So we've nearly missed things. We thought at first it was just all newspapers and cuttings, but now it turns out there's all sorts of really exciting stuff in here.
So I guess you've got this system. We've got Ray's system. Then John has tried to get these into drawers, and now, even though there's some kind of logical order, there's gold in between each of these different
Yes.
papers. So really, you've got to take every single one out, haven't you? Give it a shake and
And-
see if there's anything in it.
Absolutely, and it's not in a system that anybody else could use. Really, it's not.
Right.
It sort of wanders around the country from place to place in a strange order. So it's not something that anybody else would follow. So we're taking stuff out and we're putting it into box files according to themes
Right.
or subjects, and then they can be indexed, and then people can go to them rather than sort of having to leaf through lots and lots of cuttings.
And I
So
get-
these the box files above it are the ones that have been sorted. So there are sort of a series of box files about heavy industry. That was some programs that Ray did about British heavy industries. They're Baxi boilers, British steel, things like that. That was a series called Gosling on France, and and he's sort of travelling around in France talking to, and he did all the standard things talking about cafes, but being Ray, he also did a thing about French technology and trams, because he was interested in engineering and the new things that were happening at the time in France.
So did he kind of go off on a bit of a tangent when he was researching for programmes and kind of bring in his own interests, would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think and it would depend on what he picked up. He'd just hang around in a place. I mean, he'd do lots of research. He'd hang around there, picking up things from the street, looking at posters in windows, talking to people, and then he'd do probably quite a different slant from the way anyone would do it nowadays. And quite interesting stuff came as a result of that.
And I mean, I mean, just the colour of the paper here, you get the sense of age, the smell, everything. But
well, he was working for 50 years. You know, he was working from the early 60s right until 2010, something like that. So we've got 50 years worth of work, and he didn't stint on his work. He was a very prolific writer and film producer in his television films.
Because I mean, we've got these documents, but I think one of the most interesting things recently, and this kind of gives you a sense of what is a valuable artifact. Sugar cubes. Can you tell us the sugar cube story?
Well, these sugar cubes started popping up out of because we were emptying, as well as the stuff that was in a way filed. If you've ever seen any photos of what the archive room was like, towards the end, the floor was deep in papers. Also, his flat was deep in papers. So all those had to be moved in boxes. And we've gone through the boxes bit by bit, and things would sort of fall out of the boxes, you know, and we'd often find things like packets of sugar cubes, and there's one with sort of Antwerp written on the sugar cube, so it didn't have any other distinguishing features. He'd just written Antwerp to say where he got it, and then so we sort of thought, oh, what is this? Is it relevant? Is it worth keeping? And then a note sort of popped up saying that he was looking for a shelving to put his cigarette packets and sugar cubes on. So obviously he consciously collected those things.
Why would he collect sugar cubes? What do you think is the fascination?
He was
there?
a sort of inordinate collector. I mean, we've got all his childhood things. He used to collect. Well, he was a railway spotter. He ran a railway club. He would collect leaflets. He collected all these leaflets from the motor shows that his dad went to. And catalogued them all and labelled them all. So all through his life he was collecting different things. He collected model cars, and he collected books, of course. And so I think it was just part of that. And he didn't really like to throw anything away, which is why we have so much stuff.
I mean, looking around us here, realistically, how long do you think it would take to get all of these documents into a kind of system that would be accessible to people? I know it's a
long
tough
time.
question.
We've really spent over a year on it, and we're really only roughly grouping the documents together. And we've still got all the filing cabinets to go through. We haven't done his archive. We've got stuff from. He had a room in Manchester that was floor to ceiling. We've brought that over and sorted that. He had in his flat. He had a lot of the valuable stuff he thought was valuable when he died, and we've cleared that, and we've sorted all that into box files, but we haven't really got on with this. I mean, I'm afraid it is going to take years to get it into a decent order. So it's really accessible, but things could be extracted from it now if there was particular interest. I mean,
so it's a case of getting it into kind of rough categories at the moment, and then from that just going a bit deeper and I guess explain what every single document is, so that it can be used as a research tool for people. Because I mean, this is the most incredible biography here, isn't it? I mean, this really is an insight into someone's soul.
Well, it's also, and his sort of work on different people and different things. He looked at such a range of things. You know, he was looking at anthropology. He was looking at sort of sociology. He was looking at. He had interviews with famous people. Some things are very, very well researched, and there's lots of documents and lots of documentation. Other programs that he did, we don't have very much on, and we don't really know what happened to those things. But so it's not all about Ray and Ray's background. It's about England, and he did a whole, or more than England, because he travelled abroad as well. He did a whole he did a whole series of programs about towns and places in England. He was interested in the north of England particularly, not so much the south. And he would sort of go to a place again, do this research, pick up things, produce a radio program, and then it would be reprinted as an article in the Listener. And they're just remarkable. The sort of like a gazetteer of Britain in the 60s, really, and they're really valuable.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you showed me before, which I thought was really interesting, is you can see the process of journalism, where you've got the old galleys and you've got the articles. Could you tell us a little bit about...
Well, the most obvious way where you can see that is with the book reviews, because he wrote book reviews, but from things ranging from the Times to Peace News to... so it was a massive range of publications that he worked for. So we've got the original books with notes in them that he made as he read the original book. Then we've got his written notes, and then we've got a sort of typed draft. Then we've got the final draft that he did that was sent to the publisher, and then the galley that was a sort of long strip of printing that was before it went to press, that he would do a final check on it, and then we've got the actual publication that it went into. So you've got a complete run of things like, and some articles are like that he wrote, because he was very much in demand for doing sort of stroppy articles and controversial articles in all the leading magazines at the time.
I think what's most interesting about that is you can actually trace the process of thought. You, like you say, you can see the notes in the book, you can see the final proofs. And I guess in the digital age, we live in a kind of world of perfection where people go onto websites, they keep re-editing things, they update it, so you don't actually get that sense of history. And I think that's what's so fascinating going through these archives.
It was much more hard work then. I mean, that's his typewriter up there, one of his typewriters, a great heavy thing, if you think he carried that around with him.
Well, let's try and lift it up.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
a beast.
Carry them, and then and he'd do 4 or 5 drafts of an article, and keep amending it, and it would be painfully typed out, finger by finger, on one of these, and then so he'd really work at it. I mean, we've even found letters that he wrote to friends, and he'd redraft them until he got it right. So it was he did work very hard on what he wrote.
I think the thing that I personally love the most about Ray is the way that he was always able to bring the humanity into any situation. And my favourite quote ever by him was when he was talking about a mental hospital, and he described it as a community of sensitive people. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And I noticed that in some of the archives there's like little scribbles of descriptions of people. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
They're not critical scribbles. They're, like someone has got a nice hat, or someone is interested in this, and he certainly was able to empathise with people, and people knew that. So it became a bit of a problem in a way, because everybody thought they were friends with him for life, and he couldn't maintain that. So right until the end, really, he could just devote his full attention to a person he was talking to, and they would come out with all sorts of things. It was great for interviewing them, but it was also he would just be like that when he was researching things. And so that was one of his skills, really. But he was quite serious about it. It wasn't just a tool for him. He really was interested in everybody, and he did keep these little notebooks about what everybody said and about what he was thinking at the time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, again, thinking of the modern era and digital technology, it's so functional. You know the way you find things through search engines, it's all about precision. And I just love that you have a little file that says big nice smile, dog barks a lot, and things like that. And I guess they are the things that we remember about people. You know, those kind of personal details,
real humanity rather than this sort of cold digital thing.
Okay, well, thanks for talking to us, Colin. I mean, this is incredible space.
What do you want to do?
I just hope that in a couple of years it can become accessible to people a little bit more, and maybe if it can be digitised, maybe some of these artefacts could be used by students or inspire them to go on and do other kinds of work. Just as a last question, What would you, and I know it's a difficult question, what would you like to see happen to the archives? So what do you think Ray would like to happen to the archives?
Well, I think he'd be very pleased that someone attempted to make use of it rather than it all being lost. I think he would like it to be accessible, because a lot of it is about things that have gone that maybe shouldn't have gone, or the things that we ought to reference and we ought to think about, and just views of places that have gone or have changed. Just things like, you know, all the local businesses and local industry that's all gone now. So I'm sure he'd be really pleased, and yeah, it would be great if we could make it more accessible. I'm sure he would also want public access, not purely students.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, for instance, with all the community projects he was involved with in St Anne's, I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learnt from how his organisation Satra worked, and that's relevant to groups now.
Okay. Thanks, Colin.
Okay.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.